By Monday, the first day of exam week, the infection had tracked deep up her arm. The red line that had started at her finger now reached past her wrist, a vivid streak that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. The bacterial fever hit her like a physical blow, a wave of heat and weakness that made the world tilt when she stood up too quickly. Her skin was alternately burning and freezing, her body unable to settle on a single temperature, as if her thermostat had broken under the strain. She woke at 4:30 a.m. as always. She heated the water, she scrubbed the clothes, she lit the Jiko as usual, then walked 45 minutes to school. Each step was a calculation now. Left foot, breathe. Right foot, breathe. Don't fall. Don't stop. The exam starts at 8 o'clock. You need to be there. You need to be ready. The morning of the mathematics paper arrived with a sky the color of old bruises, heavy with rain that never fell. This was her sanctuary. This was her guaranteed perfect score. Mathematics was not a subject to achieve. It was a language she spoke more fluently than Swahili, more naturally than Luo. The numbers were her friends, her confidants, the only things in her life that never lied, never disappointed, never demanded more than she could give. She sat at her wooden desk in the examination hall, and the shivering began. It started in her knees, a rhythmic knocking against the wood of the desk that she couldn't control. Her teeth chattered softly, a sound she tried to muffle by pressing her lips together. Cold sweat beaded on her forehead and ran in thin lines down her temples, pooling at the collar of her faded school uniform. The invigilator, a severe woman from the district education office, handed out the papers with mechanical efficiency. Aching took hers with both hands because her right hand was shaking too badly to hold it alone. She turned the paper over. The equations, usually her closest and most reliable friends, were swimming. She blinked, she squeezed her eyes shut and opened them again. She commanded her brain to focus, to process, to see. But the numbers detached themselves from the page, blurring in the heat of her delirium. They floated like fish in murky water, visible one moment, gone the next. The symbols that usually arranged themselves into elegant solutions, now scattered like startled birds, refusing to land in any pattern she could recognize. Cold sweat dripped onto the answer sheet, smudging the cheap ink into blue-gray smears. She wiped at it with her sleeve, leaving streaks across the page. Every time she gripped the pencil with her infected hand, a shockwave of nausea rolled through her chest, rising from her stomach to her throat in a wave that made her swallow convulsively. She knew this. She had done this 1,000 times. Question 1. Simplify the expression. She knew this. She had done this 1,000 times, but the numbers seemed to swim on the page, rearranging themselves into configurations that made no sense. She forced her eyes to track from left to right, reading the question 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, until the words finally settled into meaning. Her pencil moved, slowly at first, then with gathering speed as she found the rhythm. The familiar patterns. She solved for x. She calculated the area. She found the median and the mode. Each problem required twice the effort, 3 times the concentration. Her mind fighting through a fog that seemed to thicken with each passing minute. The fever peaked and receded in waves. During the peaks, she could barely hold the pencil. During the recessions, she wrote furiously, trying to compress a lifetime of preparation into the narrow windows of clarity. She fought. She fought with the terrifying, silent endurance she had used to survive her mother's household her entire life. She had learned this endurance in the dark hours of the morning, scrubbing clothes until her hands bled. She had learned it in the heat of the kitchen, cooking for a family that never thanked her. She had learned it in the silence of her corner, studying by the light of a dying candle while the house slept around her. She forced her eyes to focus, calculating complex fractions through a fog of pure agony. She constructed geometric proofs with a mind that felt like it was wading through waist-deep mud. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the red line on her arm seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, until the nausea became a constant companion that she simply learned to ignore. But genius requires clarity, and her body was at war. The invigilator walked past her desk, paused, looked down. Aching kept writing, her head bent, her pencil moving in short, jerky strokes. The invigilator moved on. What could she do? Send a student home during the national exams because she looked sick? The system had no room for compassion. The system had no room for variables. When the final bell rang, Aching didn't walk out of the hall with the others. She gathered her papers, placed them in the envelope, stood up from her desk. But the world tilted. The floor rose to meet her, and she collapsed forward, her cheek pressing against the cold wood of the desk. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was the answer sheet, the smudged ink, and the numbers that had cost her everything.